Elise Bradley's husband got a little bit too involved with his new video game, Modern Warfare 3. So rather than scream and holler at him that she was feeling rejected and abandoned, she did something quite unique. This is a true story. She offered her husband to the highest bidder on Craigslist. And this is the ad that she put on Craigslist. Easy to maintain, just feed and water him every 3 to 5 hours. You must have internet and space for gaming. Got tired of waiting, so he's free to a good home. If acceptable replacement is offered, we'll trade. Now, the local newspaper picked up on this, and Elise had to admit that it was just a good-natured joke. I don't know if Mr. Bradley got the message, but sometimes certainly humor can be a very therapeutic way of dealing with stress and tension in our lives, of which it seems that our world and our lives are quite filled with these days. The scriptures this weekend, as Jonathan so beautifully sang the responsorial psalm, "If today you hear God's voice, harden not your hearts." And Paul writes to the Corinthians, "I really don't want you people to be filled with anxiety." How extremely appropriate for a world where so many hearts are hardened, and there's so much extreme anxiety in our lives and our families and our government. So I wonder, what is happening in our world today? Well, as I reflect upon it, my sense is that it relates to how difficult it is for all of us to live with paradox. Now, a paradox is an apparent contradiction. Two things that seem to exclude one another, but they need not do so. A square circle is a contradiction, but a saintly sinner or a holy fool, those are paradoxes. And I believe that so often we take ourselves so seriously and we make such unreasonable demands on each other for perfection that we create so much of our own anxiety. I believe we have to come to the realization that our human situation is not an either-or situation. It's a both-and situation. Now, in psychology, we call this splitting. When you see a person as totally good or you see a person as totally bad, that's what's called splitting. The reality is that we are a little bit of both. We have, all of us, inside of ourselves the potential to soar to the heights and to sink to the depths. It's just about being human. And when we forget this, when we take ourselves way too seriously, we become anxious. And we often harden our hearts against ourselves, against each other, against your spouses. I think we are all fully aware that Joe Paterno died this week. What an amazing career. What a horrible fall from grace. Was he all bad? No. Was he all good? No. He made mistakes. Like all of us, he was a little bit of both. So many of the people that we idolize fall from grace. And then it's so easy to harden our hearts against them. Or we struggle so hard to keep that shadow side of ourselves from showing that we create more anxiety than if we simply accepted our own humanness and we strove every day to do the best we can do and always start over when we fall. Isn't this the beauty of the Catholic emphasis on the sacrament of reconciliation? That we admit that we are a sinful people, that we need constant, daily reconciliation. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Jim Henson. Jim Henson was the inventor of the Muppets. And I really believe that he was very much in touch with this both-and aspect of our humanness. In those intelligently wholesome television programs, it was great family entertainment, and it was geared to both adults and children. And I believe that in his creative way, he challenged our self-created anxiety with a very powerful moral vision. Now, his collaborator was a man by the name of Frank Oz, and he writes that their approach to the Muppets was this: whenever characters become self-important or sentimental in the Muppets, then there's always another character to blow them up immediately. You see, Jim Henson believed that people are basically very good, but also extremely human. So he drew his characters, his Muppet characters, as very real. David Zoll was writing about this. He called this kind of a shared ridiculousness. Fozzie was hopelessly insecure. Piggy was an egomaniac. Kermit was long-suffering. Gonzo was a self-described weirdo. Animal was simply animal, and the list can go on and on. The great message of the Muppets is that their weaknesses tell the stories, not their strengths, and that those weaknesses are frequently a source of humor. Paul writes to the Corinthians, "Brothers and sisters, I would like you to be free of anxieties." Paul could write that to each one of us today, because anxiety so overwhelms so many of us, and we so easily become hardened when we cannot accept the paradoxical aspects of life, the both and, not the either or. One of Jim Henson's biographers wrote, "His faith in humanity began from an acknowledgement of limitation, not an illusion of perfectibility." Perfection is an illusion. We all have to live with the imperfect, and we have to strive every day to be better, and none of us can ever escape, though, that ambiguity of our humanness. And I would bet that each one of us in this church today have had the experience of at one time or another thinking that we had it all together, and we've deluded ourselves into believing in our own invincibility, and something happens that reminds us of our frailty. We do something stupid. Remember what Paul always wrote? "I do the things I shouldn't do, and I don't do the things I should do." How many of us can say that probably every day of our lives? Jim Henson had the right idea. Every time one of his characters becomes self-important, there was another one that blew him out of the water. It was through the weaknesses of the characters that the stories were told, not their strengths. And their hearts weren't hardened, and they laughed at each other, and they were lighthearted. I really hope that Elise, Bradley's husband, was able to catch the humor in what she did on Craigslist and have a great laugh with his wife, and hopefully turn the computer off for a while and spend some time with her. There's a great book that was written by Ernest Kurtz and Catherine Ketchum, and the title is The Spirituality of Imperfection, and this is what they write. "The essential paradox of human life is that we are always and inevitably incomplete, on the way, slipping and sliding, making mistakes. The voices of great spiritual masters from the past tell us that this is not failure, it is rather the necessary reflection of the paradox that we are. Paradox is the nature of being human, of human being. Paradox is the way it should be, for it is the way we are made." Now, there was a teacher in a religious education class, and she posed this question to her little ones that she was teaching that day. And the question she said to them was, "If all the good people in the world were red, and all the bad people were green, what color would you be? And little Mary thought mightily for a long moment. Then her face brightened and she said, I'd be streaky. And that's what Jim Henson gives us in his wonderful Muppet characters. Streaky people. And maybe that's what can keep us from anxiety. Accept our streakiness and harden not our hearts.